Wife Directive 7, The Great Marriage Mystery. Hello everybody, I'm Jim McCotter. Welcome. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22 through 24 and 32, it says this, "For wives, this means submit to your husbands as to the Lord. For a husband is the head of his wife as Christ is head of the church. As the church submits to Christ, so you wives should submit to your husbands in everything. This is a great mystery, but it's an illustration of the way Christ and the church are one." End quote. Submit to your husband in everything. If you think that's an amazing command, think of this, submit to as to the Lord. How should we submit to the Lord? In honor, in reverence, in fear, in respect, in trust, with a whole heart, without any reservation, without any arguing or talking back, immediately, happily, cheerfully, joyfully, enthusiastically. Wow. But that's what he said, to submit to your husband as you would to the Lord. A person can only manifest love and honor to God to the degree that they manifest love and honor to who they can see. 1 John 4:20 says, "If we don't love people we can see, how can we love God whom we cannot see?" End quote. Jesus said in Matthew 25:40, quote, "What you do unto the least of my brothers, you do it unto me." End quote. If that's true with the least of brothers, what does Jesus think about how you treat him in treating the most important brother in your life, your husband? To submit to your husband as to the Lord also carries a restrictive force. Since the Lord would never ask you to submit to anything that is unrighteous, if a husband ever asked a wife to submit to anything that is unrighteous, a godly wife would never submit to that, since that could not be done as to the Lord. The verse goes on to say, "A husband is the head of his wife as Christ is head of the church." Are you viewing your husband as your head, like a church should view Christ as its head? Doesn't this convey total leadership and control? Does that bother you? If so, what is it that you want to usurp leadership and control in over your husband's headship? In what do you want to have your own independent headship? It is in that very area that Satan will entice you to make his entrance into your life. And that will be the beginning point of spiritual destruction, and that will affect everything else, just as it did with Eve. She that is naive to the spiritual world will surely suffer accordingly. 1 Peter 5:8 says, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour." If a wife submits to her husband in everything, she will not only be obeying Christ, but she will be the picture of Christ, and even like Christ. Christ submits to his head, God the Father, in everything. 1 Corinthians 11:3 and John 6:38 say this, "And the head of Christ is God. For I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me." End quote. The great marriage mystery. By a wife submitting to her husband in everything, God will bless her for living out his created design for her as a wife to her husband. And she will also be a blessing to her husband and children. But most important, when the wife submits to her husband in everything, she displays in her marriage the great marriage mystery. That is, the way Christ and the church are one. As verse 32 says, quote, "This is a great mystery, but it's an illustration of the way Christ and the church are one." End quote. Wife, you are the best illustration and picture to your husband, to your children, and to all the world of how God and his church are one. Partial submission manifests only partial oneness. total submission manifests total oneness. And wife, think about this. The way you illustrate submission to your husband head is the way you would like your husband to submit to his head, Christ. Also, how you illustrate submission to your husband is the way you would like your children to submit to their head, to their father, and to you. Wife, your example towards your husband head results in God blessing you, you being a blessing to your husband and children and others in the world that see you. Moreover, 1 Corinthians 11:10 reveals that the whole angelic world, being submissive to their head, are also watching if Christian women are illustrating this great marriage mystery in showing submission to their husband heads in 1 Corinthians 11:10. Finally, Ephesians 5:32 says, this is a great mystery, but it's an illustration of the way Christ and the church are one.